Okay.
You ready,
Cool.
Senor?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brandon Zamel. I'm the founder and CEO of Springbok Entertainment. It's a production and financing entity for immersive content. We're here to go over a music video, the very first narrative VR music video ever produced. We've got a great collection of individuals. I'll let them all introduce who they are and what their role is in this particular project. But what we're essentially going to be going over here is what the creative and strategic process is in creating a piece of content like this. On the one hand, trying to create something that is very compelling for an average audience, while at the same time exploring a lot of the unknowns of what this medium ultimately has that we still need to find solutions to. So to my left is Andrew McGovern. I'll let him introduce himself and we'll go from there.
I'm Andrew McGovern. I'm Vice President of Immersive Media's Media and Entertainment Division called IM360. It's a joint venture between Digital Domain and Immersive Media. And our role within the project was to really provide the underlying technology to enable people like Matthew and Brandon to go out and capture this content, record it, stitch it together, and provide really neat and inventive ways in which we can distribute this to audiences across multiple platforms.
I'm Matthew Gratzner, a co-founder and creative director of New Deal Studios. I had the opportunity to work with Brandon and the band and IM360 on the video. I was the director and writer, and New Deal came on as a producing partner as well, since we do a lot of production and post work. It was a great experience. We'll go into all the details of what we're all about, what we're doing, but I don't want to hold up the guys.
I'm Matthew DiMartini. I was part of the band who acted in the video and joined with these great companies to make it come true.
I'm Chris Traylor, and I am lead singer, guitarist of the band Galvanized Souls with him, and yeah.
Great. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to walk through what it is to conceptualize a piece in this space, what pre-production looks like, production, post, as well as what the market strategy is in delivering this piece of content to a wide audience. Now, what I thought would be beneficial for all of us, so we have context here, is that we're actually going to play the music video. How many people have actually seen the video already? Okay, awesome. So for those of you that haven't, obviously I would imagine you're already well versed in what VR is. So what you're going to be seeing here is a flat version of a 360 video. And that's certainly something we can talk about as far as in post-production workflow. But it will certainly give you context to what we're going to be going over today. So without further ado,
we're gonna love this. Boom! Am I right? Yeah, baby. You know it. Now don't, not all at one time. Oh my God. All right. Wait, I got an idea. What about you guys as an EDM death metal group with like a Britpop flair? Huh? And we tour you around with a bunch of like smaller kinds of musicians, really tiny. And new generation.
All right, so there's some context. So first off, let's talk about how a piece like this initially comes together and kind of what the objectives are, which something crazy like this certainly deserves a little bit of explanation. So I ran digital and interactive content for Johnny Depp's company for a number of years, and I left to focus full-time in immersive content. I've known Galvanized Souls for quite a few years, both on a professional and a personal level, and as innovative artists on their end and always looking for new mediums to leverage in their storytelling, that I thought this would be a fantastic opportunity for us to collaborate and really create something substantial here. Now, ultimately, I, as well as everyone on this panel, are firm believers that storytelling is the key to successful VR. I say this quite often when I speak, that the immersive nature of virtual reality is not entertainment. It is not what you should be selling to your audience. It's part of an experience. It's a tool that needs to be utilized, harnessed correctly, and part of that is putting together the right team that understands that. So Matthew and New Deal, and Matthew, do you want to talk a little bit as far as your experience in VR, because it's quite substantial, and yeah.
We've been working in VR for a long time, like a year. So, I mean, the reality is like it's very short-lived thing, but it's a short inception. Look, I'm very fortunate that I work with Brandon and the band, and I've had some very early experiences. You know, my company is a visual effects and production company. We do practical work and effects, miniature effects, and photographic things. I direct and produce. We do a lot of live action content. And so we were fortunate enough back in like end of May of 2014 to, through some people we know, there was a Stan Winston School of Character Arts, be introduced to Jaunt. And this was like a new camera that had come out, and it was like, what is this VR stuff? I mean, I remember VR in the 90s, and that was like, the technology couldn't support it. It was really cool, but there was nothing like this. And so I saw their demo, and I said, hey, this is really neat. And they're like, well, do you want to make, we want to make some shorts. And so I had some ideas, and we ended up putting together a thing called The Mission, which is, funny enough, it's finished as a cut, and Jaunt is reworking their stitching to get the best 3D to date, and it's looking really good. So I'm hopefully going to show that soon enough. There's a trailer for it. It's like a minute and a half. Everybody thinks the whole Mission, it's a World War II piece. It's like Mission Impossible in the 1940s. And everybody thinks that like what you see on Google Play, which is a minute and a half, is the film. It's not. It's actually a 6-minute film that is really action adventure, and a lot of we did everything that I was told you couldn't do in VR. I said, well, they said, well, not they being Jaunt, but just in general, the VR landscape was you can't move the camera, you can't do hard cuts, and everything has to be told first person. I'm like, well, that's kind of limiting, and it's not going to be that exciting. So I did a test, which was all of like an hour of shooting with their camera up in Petaluma, where we shot the picture. And when I came back, and the script was originally written by Joe Kanarick, who's in the audience, and his writing partner, Ryan Gaudet, as a first-person experience, because I was like, well, we have to do that. Well, when I did the test and I shot it as a third-person experience, very similar to what we did with the music video, I realized, this is actually really compelling, because while first-person is very compelling as a VR experience, the problem is because you can't see your hands or your body and you're not interacting, I feel that you're getting robbed of a certain experience. Also, because true virtual reality is where you're being able to move around the space and do things. In photographic virtual reality, we can't do that. We're not yet. With light field capture, maybe down the road. But with this, we can only turn around and look at things. So I thought, okay, what if I put people in a movie or in an experience? So the content that I'm interested in creating and have been creating is more of like you're in a Hollywood movie. And so there's the interactive experience of being able to look around and see what's going on and you're in the scenes, but there's also a passive level of the experience, which I also believe a lot of people are interested in, where you're not so involved in it where you feel you're maybe in danger or that you have to make a decision, because God knows nobody wants to make decisions in life. So sitting there watching somebody else do something dangerous is far greater experience. But so with the mission, I learned a lot, and we did crazy stuff. Jaunt had never really done anything but put a camera on a tripod, and it was really cool stuff. And they shot like a skate park and a string quartet and some other things within their demo. And when the script was written and we delivered it to Jaunt, the first question was, so how are you going to do this thing with like the parachute? And I said, is it going to be CG? I said, no, I'm going to stick your camera on a parachute. We're going to drop it from like 90 feet up. And they're like, we only have a few cameras. I said, it'll be fine. So we did that, and like the tank is full scale and everything. So I got an idea of how to shoot at least, and when I say an idea, look, everybody in VR who says, oh, we're doing all these, everybody's making stuff up as they go along. I mean, it's a new experience, and it's a new language of entertainment, and in some ways, this new experience in cinema. So not to ramble on about that, the ability to shoot the way we were shooting really gave me a sense of what made sense in how to tell a story. And my background is obviously visual effects and production and live action filmmaking, but deeper than that, I used to do theater. I was directing and acting and that sort of thing 20-some years ago.
And that was a big part of where we bonded over kind of the theory and philosophy of what VR cinema had to offer. And when we were looking at the opportunities to do a virtual reality music video, that was something we really wanted to explore, because obviously some of the greatest music videos that are out there, they lean heavy on narrative. It's not just enough to just show the performance, especially with how intelligent and sophisticated the general audience is now
right.
to content. To a question to the band, to Chris and Matt, what was one of your first VR experiences? I know the answer, but I think it gives good context here for the purposes of discussion.
Well, our first experience with virtual reality was watching the Paul McCartney video. I'm sure most of you have seen. And I think that was a good first experience for us since we're in a band, and it just shows us the possibilities of what fans and viewers can experience through virtual reality.
Yeah, and for us, obviously, there was kind of the low-hanging fruit to really show off the technology of just sticking a camera and letting the band do what they naturally do. But at the same time, these guys had made a whole bunch of music videos. They were experimenting a whole lot with storytelling. So that was something we really wanted to make sure that we could implement here. And for the purposes of what we all wanted to accomplish, on the one hand, we wanted to create a really compelling piece of content for fans, while at the same time experiment enough with what this medium was so we were contributing to kind of the progress of this industry as a whole. So that's where the initial team came together in bringing this idea up. A big part of it, and this kind of starts going into the pre-production aspect of it, which, Andrew, I certainly want you to start chiming in here too from a camera support standpoint, but you have to justify where you're taking people, right? And in this sense, we knew we wanted the video to be transportive, we knew we wanted to go to all these incredible places, but we needed something that justified putting on the headset and kept you moving forward. The music is going to drive you, from a time standpoint, but what's going to drive you emotionally. So a big part of that was where this idea came from of the band is going to all these different set pieces that are ultimately trying to get to their music video set. It's a very loose narrative, but ultimately works very effectively and allows us to focus on all the other aspects of it as well. Matt, do you want to add to that at all?
That was, I looked at what was out there in VR, and again, there's not a lot of stuff. I mean, there are people shooting with cameras which are terrific. You can get the, different GoPro configurations, and people should go out there and just make stuff. But when I was looking at the more professionally done music videos, a lot of them were just, the band playing. And I thought, what I loved about music videos, and in the heyday of MTV back in the day, in the 80s, you had like Van Halen and, of course, Beastie Boys, and even later Foo Fighters. And there were always these tongue-in-cheek, never took themselves that seriously music videos. And they were great stories. And there was an endearing quality, I should say, to the band, because they're sort of not taking themselves so seriously, and you like them that much more. So,
and I think for the purposes of VR too, because we're experimenting so much with what this format is, there has to be a little bit of that tongue-in-cheek, because if you're trying to drive home too much of this incredible idea of what VR can do, and you don't 100% succeed, and none of us are 100% succeeding right now because we're literally creating the language of what this medium is, you're going to fall flat on your face. And for the purposes of the band, we wanted to make sure we were giving them something that could really stand with pride and was effective. So humor, I think, was a big part of that cushion.
Well, yeah, and it's just important because here's the deal: you gotta get an audience in on, and this is actually any piece of cinematic content, any piece of content. You know, you've got to have some level of not taking yourself so seriously to get people to connect with you. And I thought that what I loved about those old videos were you had great music and you had a great story and it got you on board. And as Brandon said, with VR, you've got to get people into the story as quickly as you can. You know, ridiculous headset and everything. So we want people to forget that they're looking through a Google Cardboard or wearing a headset. And then, so from that point of view, I talked to the band about like, well, what exactly, you know, do you want to take it not as seriously? And you guys were like, yeah, we'll have fun with it. And then I was just like, all right, great, you get to crash through some stuff. I mean, these are young men, give them swords and guns. I mean, what else can you do in these sorts of situations?
Yeah, know your audience, right?
Yeah, and so, but it was great. And I will say, these guys did a tremendous job. They had learned how to do, you know, stage combat. They learned how to shoot guns. I mean, it's very few, you know, times in your life where you get to do that stuff and then actually, you know, do it in your own music video. So they did a terrific job, and we had we had 2 days to shoot. I turned stuff around very quickly, so the production aspects of it, in terms of just the physical production, was we were shooting at times, again working with Immersive, shooting with 2 cameras at times. You know, so I'm getting coverage on the action. The Robin Hood sequence, because I didn't want to back us into a corner where we had to spend a lot of time digitally painting things out. We actually do a fair amount of digital work at our studio, so we were doing. There was certain shots that had to do a lot of work more than just the stitching in post, because we were doing things that the camera, you know, we're pushing the camera super close to the actors, which caused a lot of stitching errors. There were just things that are just hard to do in VR that we did.
And there's 2 things too now that we're kind of going into production that I want to cover. I mean, one, and guys, you know, from Galvanize, we've talked about this, and I think it's a good point for everybody in the audience that as artists who work in the performance space, you've worked with videos before, the transition to working into a 360 space. Was there a difference? Was there not a difference? How did you guys find working in that new medium?
Well, I felt I didn't find any challenges doing any kind of virtual reality filming. It kind of felt all the same, and just doing any kind of music video. The only kind of flip side or difference that you would see is that it's capturing everything around the whole space.
Just not as much flexibility, I guess, in cuts for errors. So a big part of this process also is determining your camera solution. And I want to turn this over to Andrew for a moment, because there was a very deliberate choice in going with Immersive. And part of this is when you're figuring out what your experience is going to be, the way that I describe it to people is it's kind of like a checklist, right? You've got kind of your creative dreams of what you want to accomplish from a storytelling standpoint. You have ultimately what your market or your business strategy is, which is what the platforms are you going to leverage, who's your target audience, and also you've got to just recognize what technology is available to you and what works within your budget. And as we kind of went down through that checklist, we ended up at Immersive as the best solution. And with that said, they have several different camera options and pipelines that Andrew, if you want to speak to that, I think that would be very valuable for everyone.
Yeah, sure. And a lot of what we do at Immersive is we really focus on, as Brandon said, that platform. And it's really providing people with the tools necessary to go out and bring these stories that they envision in their minds and in a script to life. You know, with cameras, you know, the ability to capture or live stream this, ability to stitch it together, to distribute it, to play it back to viewers on any device or platform. And really, we work with Matthew and Brandon and the band of kind of figuring out, okay, we have an idea. How do we really translate that into video, into virtual reality? And we worked with them on, you know, customizing cameras, you know, using different geometric designs that might be better for certain scenes and, you know, what the creative was really calling for. And then really providing that whole framework that's going to allow people like Matthew in production to go, visualize the scene on set, make sure we're getting what we're capturing. Is the talent hitting their marks? Is lighting right? Being able to provide that framework, on set with the camera as well as the stitching, but also going back afterwards and making sure we can stitch this all together. It's going to turn into a seamless image at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of planning, and both Andrew and Matthew can certainly speak to that goes into the choreography of it, trying to avoid those parallax issues so that ultimately you're capturing the best experience that you can. And the other thing, too, that Immersive provided for us was we had a team there that was doing a quick stitch of what we were shooting so that we were making sure that we were getting the shot. And in a case like this, I think that's a really important consideration for your workflow, that you're going to have big explosions, you're going to have big set pieces, you're going to have live ammunition going off. You want to make sure that everything is captured and is going to look good. And that was something that Immersive was really, really critical on for our workflow. As far as challenges in the actual production process with our shoot, inevitably there are always challenges in production. VR just adds a whole new aspect to it. Can you guys talk a little bit to that?
Well, the biggest challenge, really, and the guys touched on, is we're shooting 360. One of the things that I think is exciting about VR and what we're trying to do, because I've spent a lot of my career doing things in camera or almost in camera, from visual effects and production, is shooting VR live 360. So if we're moving the camera, you're seeing everything that we see on set. You as a viewer are seeing the same thing. What I find, there's some VR techniques where people will lock off the camera very rigidly, and they'll shoot the front half of a hemisphere, and then the rear half is a separate plate, and they'll make sure actors stand in a certain area because they don't want to cross within seams and other things. And I get that, and it's a great technique, but it limits you. So my experience...
Yeah, if the experience allows for it, then that's kind of that checklist, right? What does your experience call for? And then you kind of work backwards.
But the big thing is when we're shooting something, like everything you see in here is happening real time.
Right.
From bullet shots to the swordplay, obviously. But the rocket launch, prime example. The rocket, I work a lot with Richie Helmer, who's a terrific pyrotechnician. He did like Apocalypse Now and Jaws and a bunch of other movies. And I said to him, I want to do an old school, rocket on a wire. I said, let's just do it in camera. I don't want to composite it in. I don't want to deal with it because it may not look good or it may look very hokey. I mean, it's a hokey scene anyway. It's a kind of a parody of a 70s cop drama, but we did it in camera. So poor Matt has to hold this bazooka as this like rocket with a solid fuel engine in it is run down a wire and then timed to an explosion. So all that stuff was done in camera. We did digitally paint out the wire and such, but preparation for any type of production in VR is extraordinarily crucial. You can't just make stuff up on the day. The one thing I have to say, and I've said it to a number of younger filmmakers, the idea of shooting coverage, traditional filmmaking now is like, I'll just shoot a bunch of coverage, I'll get 2 cameras, 3 cameras, and I'll shoot a bunch of stuff, and I'll put the movie together in post. You can do that on a film, but you can't do that in VR. You really have trouble getting a story across because a quick cut, staccato cutting, or kind of doing smash cuts between things is so disorienting in VR, it just doesn't work. So you have to understand at all times where the actors are, where the camera is, what story the actors are telling. That's why it is akin to theater in many ways. But more importantly, how all of that is going to tell a story that doesn't confuse the audience so they don't lose the narrative.
I think that's a big part too, because there were a lot of mechanics that we were exploring and experimenting with in this space that on the one hand, trying to push this medium forward, we certainly wanted to implement, but we also had to be considerate of who was going to be viewing this content. And that was a big reason why we wanted to show you the video, because if you noticed, a lot of the things that, as Matthew had pointed out early on, were kind of the no-nos of VR filmmaking that we really wanted to try and implement here. We wanted to make sure that our audience knew what we were introducing to them so that there was a level of expectation. So the opening shot, very simple shot, but you already have a Steadicam shot so that it's established from very early on that this camera is going to move, right? The second scene with the boy band scene, it's the first time where you really have 360-degree choreography. Matt came up with this brilliant idea where there's going to be this big reveal, so So it sets you up so you know that there's going to be something behind you. It teaches the audience how to engage with this experience without it being too imposing. Then you go into the Robin Hood scene. You have a whole bunch of really sharp cuts, but if you notice, and it's a little hard, obviously, when you're looking at it on a flat monitor, but the choreography of the way that the camera moves is in line with what or rather where the cuts are, is in line with where the action is. So your eyes are always pulled to it, and that's a big part of, when they say, oh, you lose the frame as a storyteller in this space, yes, but you have these other tool sets that you can rely on, and if you have a talented team and a talented director like Matthew, it works very well. And then by the time we get to the cop scene, we kind of throw the whole kitchen sink at you because we've introduced all of these different elements that we've slowly familiarized you as the audience. Guys, I mean, you've had a tremendous amount of time to share this with people at your shows, obviously at VR conventions, a wide range of people being put in this headset. What has been the general response? I mean, a lot of these people have never seen VR before. I mean, I've been there. A lot of it's been very positive, right? They're able to navigate it.
Well, there is like a lot of great reactions, like mostly good reactions, which we're really happy to get. But then there's always like the one person out of 100 that's just like, no, not for me. But mostly really good reactions because it's their first time, and we make sure they use it on the Gear VR, so they have a great first experience.
Yeah, there's one of the things, and this kind of starts going into the rollout strategy, right? Is that we knew as much as there is a lot of artistic integrity to what we were trying to accomplish here, we also knew we were releasing this thing out into the wild, and part of that was making sure that no matter whatever platform that we could support, any way that somebody could engage with this content, we were going to give them the ability to do that. So certainly when we demo, the best way to demo something like this is the Gear VR right now, right? It's the highest resolution screen that's most readily available. It's easy to use, it travels well. But with that said, we knew we wanted a cardboard experience, right? And part of the cardboard experience was also from a marketing standpoint and a merchandise standpoint. That you guys are selling cardboards at your shows, and I mean, how has the response been to that? I mean, people seeing cardboards for the first time.
I think they're kind of speechless and stunned, just to kind of see just what is this? This is different to see at a rock show. Oh, we're selling cardboard.
It's been a great talking point for them, and ultimately, as we all know, it's kind of the lowest barrier entry point for VR. So especially with their target audience, where maybe there's not as much money in the pocket, but they certainly have the latest greatest smartphone. They're fully capable of handling that. And in that respect, Immersive was our support for app development. I mean, Andrew, do you want to talk a little bit to that and the services you guys provide there?
Yeah, sure. Like, really, when you look at a music video, who watches music videos on television anymore? Even if they're 2D, everyone's watching them on YouTube, Vivo, it doesn't matter. It's all digital distribution of ways people interact with music videos today. And it's kind of working with Brandon and the band of coming up, what's an inventive way we can get this experience out to, viewers as a whole, and looking at platforms like YouTube and working with them on making this accessible through the YouTube platform and their network, coming out and utilizing cardboard. Cardboard's a fantastic, low-end VR headset that would allow people to experience VR in a mass. We just released with New York Times and Google yesterday, putting 1 million cardboards in the New York Times. The power of cardboard allows people to experience VR on a very large scale. And also, looking at Gear VR and other platforms, and really working with Brandon and these guys and figuring out, okay, digitally, how do we get this out? And where Immersive fits in on that is we provide that back end to deliver this experience to any device or platform.
Absolutely. Part of this too is that when you create something like this, there's a lot of great content that's out there right now, but you really have to look at how the whole package is. And one of the beauties about working with artists like Galvanized Souls, where they really embrace it as part of their content pipeline, is that you get to look at all the other different facets of how you're going to integrate, in this case, VR as part of their branding, as part of their experience. So, guys, what are some of the ways that that you have embraced it beyond just the video itself?
Well,
I mean, I know you guys have T-shirts and things like that, and
well, we thought it would be a great idea to sell cardboards like Chris was talking about, because as far as we know, we're the only band selling cardboards at our shows, so that's something signature and iconic of us. So, and once people like see this box on our desk at the shows and are just like, what is that? So it's a good conversation starter.
And then part of what we also did with them was we actually pressed a single on vinyl, this particular song, and it's branded specifically for VR, and we sell those in conjunction with the cardboards. And part of that obviously is kind of the juxtaposition of an old technology of vinyl records as well as this brand new technology. And not only is it a conversation piece, but it's also a way that for the band, ultimately relying on merchandise as the biggest means of revenue generating in music, that you can differentiate yourself in the marketplace, right? So not only does it drive eyeballs to our experience, but ultimately supports the foundation of what the business structure is to be a band in this space. I think there is a lot of great content that's being created in this space, but if we don't start thinking about how we can actually generate revenue off of this, then we're all going to be in trouble, right? And part of that is looking at what content is most obtainable and finding budgets that justify that, and then also helping build the audience at the same time. So in this particular case, this is something that the band can continue to carry on with them. They can continue to make it a part of who they are, and there's a lot of different ways for them to get it into consumers' hands as well. Let's talk a little bit as far as what the future holds in this space, because certainly with YouTube 360 and with Rico Theta and Bubblecam and all of these guys coming out, 360 video is something that it's exploding already, and come this year, it's going to be all over the place. And now it becomes about quality, it becomes about user experience, it becomes about narrative. Matthew, Andrew, I'm sure you guys can talk quite a bit to this as well. I'd love to hear your opinions on this.
I would say, like, specifically to the music industry, it's a great way, VR presents a great way in which bands can really connect with their audiences. You know, you look at Galvanized and whether Taylor Swift even, they're brands, and they have, you know, the ability, they have an audience, and what virtual reality allows them to do is really go connect their story with their audience in a completely new way, whether it's live streaming from a concert or creating something like a music video, and really providing, you know, a different way of experiencing that video that you can't really get when you watch just a 2D video on your iPad. It immerses you into that story, into their culture, into their brand, and it's a great way in which, you know, music can kind of reinvent themselves in terms of the content they create.
Chris, you know, you and I talked about this once before, and Andrew kind of touched on it, the difference, and certainly both as fans of music as well as having your own following, how it's different between just working within a frame, a 2D video, versus something that's immersive. Can you speak to a little bit to that?
I think the idea that, for me, viewing another band that I've truly loved and I've listened to forever, you know, it's just the idea that I can feel a part of that person's atmosphere, you know, their world, what they're doing, how they feel, kind of almost like I can escape and be with these people that I love and cherish.
Just kind of the intimacy of it, right?
Yeah.
Of course, the empathy word that's always brought up.
And that's just something that we would love to do for fans in the future.
Future, Matt, where are we headed? What do you want to do? Where should we be looking?
I think the big thing is the market and the content and downloading, and particularly, you know, buying content is where it's going to. That's what's got to create the market. At the end of the day, if people don't download things and buy things, then VR will just disappear. And I don't mean that to be like the harbinger of doom. I just mean that it has to be a viable business model. And we've talked a lot about cardboard up here. I mean, I think the Samsung Gear VR, now I guess it's called Oculus Mobile, which is what they're coming out with, is terrific. It's probably one of the best ways to view something. The clarity is excellent. There's no latency in turning your head. It looks great. But I think the Oculus VR or Oculus Mobile is like $99, which isn't so bad. It'll take any Android phone, and I'm sure somewhere in the wings, Apple's making something. They haven't said anything, but I'm sure they're coming out with something. But at the end of the day, the idea of having just any kind of phone that you can stream content to, and as we've been talking about the Google Cardboard, having that ability to get it in the hands of everyone, that's what's going to make it work. At an event like this, or Sundance, or Tribeca, or an Engadget Escape, or TechCrunch, everybody's talking about VR. This is really great. I've gone to film schools in Los Angeles, USC one of them, a couple others, and talked about VR. And I've got students. Now you think you're in a film school in Los Angeles, and they've never heard of VR, and they've never seen a cardboard. So to me, that's a telling sign that we've really got to get these devices out there, but there's got to be content to back it up. And as I mentioned, all the people who are interested in these kinds of things at events like this, it's terrific. But it's got to get into a mass market where, with the New York Times sending out 1 million cardboards, that's fantastic. That's what has to happen. And then there has to be content to watch, because no matter how good the camera is, no matter how good the stitching is, no matter how good all the technology is, if there's nothing compelling to watch, then it's just going to sit on the shelf or get thrown away.
And I think the compelling part is a really critical theme that we should all take away from events like this, is that it's been great that marketing divisions have been spending a whole ton of money on really high quality experiences, but we're reaching a point now where it's going to start to be damaging if we're not careful, and it's going to be damaging to all of us who are ultimately interested in where this space is headed. I encourage all of you that if you go out and you create a piece in this space, that you really try to deliver something special. Doesn't mean that it can't be commercial. Doesn't mean that it can't have another objective that is ultimately what's financing the experience. But we've got to continue to show these potential consumers, these potential audiences, something new. Because if we don't, this is going to die, and we're all going to miss out on it, and we're going to be the ones that are responsible for that. Matt, I see.
But that said, one thing that I think is really exciting, and it's something that I was just on a panel. I were talking about, getting people back to movie theaters. I still like watching movies on a big screen. They're designed to be watched on a big screen. It's a much more exciting experience than watching something on a mobile device. Watching Lawrence of Arabia on your iPhone is pretty boring. But if you were to fight that fight of, well, it's hard to get people in the theater, but if you take your phone and you are watching content and you put it in a VR device or cardboard or what have you, now you have like this IMAX screen that's in 360 and potentially 3D on your head, and you can look around, have the experience of being in a giant theater at home or in a Starbucks on a cross-country flight, wherever. So I think that's something that needs to be hit upon a lot, where it's not, first of all, as I said, looking through a device, there has to be some reason you want to do this. So the content has to be different than what's necessarily on a flat screen. However, the idea of taking stuff that's really small and putting it in a device to give you the impression that you're in a big theater and that kind of experience, I think that will drive the market as well.
I would say really the fundamental thing that's really going to drive the VR market is, as Matthew was saying, it's going to be the content. And we have to be able to go out and tell great stories that are going to create demand for people to go out and buy these headsets. Cameras are going to get better. It's going to get easier to go create the content. Headsets are going to get better. That's all going to happen. But what we have to do, and what we always have to be careful of, is being able to go out and create great stories and great content. Our focus should be on how do we get VR in the hands of 1 billion people. And that's going to be through good content. You're going to go create great content that's going to create that demand. People will come and go buy it, but it's really going to be the stories. And the VR landscape's changing, and it changes every day in which how we change, how we create stories and so forth. But the thing we have to just always focus on is that demand's always going to be underpinned by great content.
Right. We have about 12 more minutes, so why don't we open it up for some questions? Yes, over there.
Yeah, well played, guys. I wanted to ask, first of all, how do I find it on Gear? Is it in Milk?
Yep.
We are everywhere. We're like a cancer. We're on Milk. We are.
That's great promo material, Brandon. We're like a cancer.
We spread it all over the place. we're on Milk VR, we're on Veridio, we're on YouTube 360, we're on Little Star, we're on iOS, we're on Android. If it supports it, we put it there. Yeah.
And have there been production innovations that have come out since you shot it not too long ago that you would integrate if you could shoot it today?
Actually, post-production innovations. We
Yeah.
work really closely with the Foundry, who makes Nuke and Moto, and we've worked with them for years on visual effects for films. And our head of digital, Jeff Jasper, is when we did the mission of over a year ago, he took a lot of the Nuke tools and said, okay, I need to do compositing in 360, 3D, and you do all these things. And he was taking these digital tools, which were not meant to do what we were doing, and he was sort of by brute force creating things and writing code. And we reached out to the Foundry and said, hey, we're doing this kind of work. And they said, we've been looking at VR. This is kind of an interesting thing. Can we work with you guys? So they created, and I don't know when it's coming out, but they've got an amazing tool set that we alpha tested on this specific project.
This video was at SIGGRAPH, and I mean, you can't appreciate the work that New Deal and the Foundry did when you see it in this format. But when you have a chance to view it in the headset, look at the paint out, for example, of the camera operator. It's incredible. It's like dark magic, right? It's truly amazing.
So.
Could I ask you to
Sure.
how you lit the set, the basic lighting package?
Good question. One of the things, because for available light outside, pretty obvious, because we just use the sun and that's pretty cheap. But for the interiors, I always try to, because we gave the environment that they're shooting a music video with the boy band, and obviously the concert lighting is very straightforward, but for the boy band, we had physical lights in the stage and just used them. But for the Robin Hood sequence, the gentleman who, it's funny because VR doesn't necessarily have a director of photography. It's more like if you're familiar with how they shoot in Germany, you have a lighting DP and a camera DP. And so our DP for film tends to be, or VR films, it tends to be like a lighting DP. So Tim Angulo, who was our DP, but lighting DP, I worked with him pretty closely to make as many of the practicals in the Robin Hood sequence real. So we made the candles were all just electric. They had a flicker box on it. And then we had real candles as well. And then he hid like some dados and some other things. And if you look carefully, you can sort of see some pings of lights. But the idea was to make it feel as believable as possible. When we did the mission, which was the World War II piece, any lighting we had that had to be put in, we hid lights underneath the tripod and some other things. But lights in the set, we just made them period 1940s cage lights or anything, and used those not only as physical practicals for decor and for set dressing, but they actually illuminated the set. So we can paint lights out, we can paint stands out. There are a lot of really great digital techniques that we've sort of come across, and in working with the Foundry and all these alpha tools they've been developing, you can do a fair amount of that. I think it's akin to, if you look at the movie like Avengers, watch one of their big set pieces. Mind you, we're not doing that yet on VR, but if you look at it where they'll build a physical set maybe 12, 16 feet up and everything else is digitally replaced, I think VR will be at that point. And in fact, funny enough, it kind of is at that point because the director Justin Lin did a project with Google, and for the life of me I can't remember the title of it, and they did tons of virtual sets. So they had physical lights in the set, they had a lot of stuff, they had some physical sets, and then they had a lot of green screen bucks and green screen backgrounds. And what they did in post was paint out all the lights, paint out all the camera equipment. I mean, it was a colossal undertaking, and it cost quite a few $1 million, which in VR is not in existence. But so you want to kind of put as many practical lights in that you don't mind being on camera, unless it's supposed to be a film shoot, which we kind of got away with on some
I would say even on like the painting side, it's like we did Neymar Jr. effect with Nike. That whole sequence was shot in a green screen room. Stadium was fake, pitch was fake, half the players were fake. We captured half of it with live action, a specialized 360 camera. The other half, we just digitally made it in. So a lot of it, and we're firm believers of, a lot of where this VR content's going to go. It's really combining those two really great art forms, which is live action, but also the CG VFX approach as well.
How large a stage did you need to do that cycle run?
Well, interesting. The cameras are extremely. Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking for this. Well, the soccer one. Yeah. What was your?
I forget the actual dimensions, but it was a mini soccer field size.
And then for what the advantage I find is a lot of these VR cameras, to get the proper overlap. I mean, we shot with GoPros on this one specifically. I just did a very small shoot with Nokia and their Ozo camera, and all the cameras have very, very wide lenses, extremely wide fields of view for the stitching. So what that affords us is the ability to, it's the pro and the con of shooting in this environment, but the sets are not as big as they look. The Robin Hood castle we built on our stage was like 20 by 24 feet. It's tiny, but when you put the lensing on it, it looks, I mean, I had these 7 guys sword fighting, these fellas here, and they are so close to each other. Nobody was hurt. The choreography worked great. These guys did a great job. But they're so close to each other that once you're on, you're looking through the lenses, it feels like, oh, these guys are, 10 feet away, and they're just about on top of each other. So you have the ability to work in tighter constraints, which also constrains it all.
Right there in the white shirt.
You have to erase a lot of ancillary equipment to get this result?
For this, no. I mean, you can.
I didn't see a tripod for the camera.
Yes.
Correct.
So
Yes.
Right.
certain artifacts down there in the
That
like
yeah.
replacement type things
We-
and other colors.
Yeah, we'll actually, funny enough, this is honestly, this is like the worst way
Yeah.
to watch the video. If you watch it in the gear, it's pretty well painted
It's
out.
it's amazing. I mean, artifacts wise, there's hardly any for what this is. What Nuke does in this space, that tool set that they're building out, it's incredible. Yeah, and I mean,
It's in the software.
correct.
software, but our
Well,
head of
that's
digital.
and the artist using it, of course.
No, it was some brute. Let me tell
Yeah.
you, the software was designed. They actually, when Nuke gave us the stitcher, it was basically a stitcher, and Jeff Jasper, as I said, our head digital, went through and he's like, this would work for this, and he kind of by brute force used some of their tools. In fact, they were sort of like, hey, we really didn't design it to do that, but hey, that's great, that works really well. And he created like a digital floor, and everything had to be tracked, and it was all, nothing was motion captured nor motion control, so it was all photographed live, so everything had to be painted out. It was challenging, but it was good.
Over there, in the checkered shirt.
Generally
Yeah.
speaking, if you have to kind of look at interior versus exteriors, do you think the exteriors are worth it right now, or should people focus?
You mean for photographic, you mean?
I mean, for me, my favorite scene in this is the cop drama scene. And certainly when you're working with GoPros, they pick up the blues a lot better than they pick up the reds. It's the color just pops. It's awesome.
Cost-wise, there's just a lot more, lighting.
Well, it's interesting. If you're doing outside, I mean, you're getting available light. I mean, you don't have you do have the ability to use bounces and diffusion, but again, you either keep it in the shot because it's part of the show or part of the creative, or you paint it out later. Shooting daylight, you're going to get better example. You've just got a better lighting kit, so to speak. But I think that in general, it just depends on what the content is and how to drive that. Cost-wise, shooting VR is very similar to shooting live-action production. On the one hand, you don't have focus pullers, you don't have a lot of camera ACs, you don't have a ton of grips, you don't have a ton of electricians, you don't have a lot of that. But on the flip side, you have a bigger post side because you have a lot of post things. So.
I think a lot of it too is just finding the balance of what the experience is, what the technology is capable of doing, what your budget is, and what cameras you're working with, right? And you kind of narrow it down from there because certain things are going to work and certain things aren't. In our case, what we constructed for that particular scene, it worked beautifully. This gentleman, I know you've had your hand up for a while.
Quick question, how quick was the quick stitch on the set?
We did it, I believe, within 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, there's something like that. I mean, a lot of the stuff I'm doing blind because we had to move on. I mean, I would look at a take and go, okay, this is looking great, but we're busting through a lot of shots. I mean, just the Robin Hood sequence, we had 7 different camera positions. I couldn't shoot 2 cameras because there was too many people crossing in and out of the cameras. I didn't want to deal with the paint out of the roto work. So we shot 1 camera, 7 different positions, and then we did it anywhere from 2 to 4 takes per camera. So these guys, and they ran, so you understand, because coverage is challenging to do, that Robin Hood scene from the second you see the juggler all the way to the band walking out was done as 1 long take. Even though it's cut up, I have basically every one of those shots as 1 take, and these fellas did it pretty flawlessly every take.
Yeah,
the
king was ready to kill everybody from having the water thrown in his face.
What's that?
What software did you use for stitching?
What are you using for stitching and doing?
I think, I'm
Yes.
not sure, I
Pano.
think it was
Pano, and then we ended up doing quite a bit of quite a bit of compositing, and we would pull a foreground and background because one of the things that I've been doing, look,
We got
biggest
5
challenge-
minutes too. I want to make sure
What's
we
that?
get. We got 5 minutes left, so I want to make sure we get a couple more.
Biggest
questions.
challenges in VR with a lot of the cameras is because of the convergence of the lenses, you end up having a lot of challenges of, oh, okay, the actor has to be 5 feet or greater from the camera. Well, if you've ever shot with any field of view of a lens, it's like an 11 millimeter lens, you know, this bottle to me through that lens looks like it's across the room. It's awful. You can't really, so we were pushing all the boundaries. I tried to get the actors as close as we could, which gave us stitching errors, just the nature of what we're doing. So there were scenes where we had to take one side of the image and one of the actors and rotor them out and, you know, lay them back in. And I mean, these are things you do in visual effects anyway, but I didn't want to let the technology compromise it creative. So I said, all right, we're going to fix this later if we have to. And we did, and we worked very closely with Immersive and made it all work.
Next question. Blue shirt.
Matt, you went against all the common wisdom about cutting and moving cameras and all of that. First of all, what gave you the confidence to do that? And second of all, what was the reaction of the audience to that? Because you hear over and over again, oh, you're just going to drive people insane.
It's a bit, actually, it's two things very quickly. It's a lucky guess sort of in the edit. I try to think about what people are going to want to look at. So, you know, it's a nature of just human nature of I'm going to look at a thing that's happening. So if I cut to a scene that's very similar, people will understand that. What gave me the confidence in doing it was actually kind of a mistake when we did, not on this, but when we did the mission, I did the camera test with John. And I really wanted to cut, but by the way, when I shot the mission, there was no editorial software. We had no idea how we were going to cut it. So I shot this movie like, well, I guess it's going to work fine, and we'll figure it out. But when we were doing the test, this gentleman by the name of Andon, who is the camera assistant, was shooting, and he had a glitch in the camera, and it cut out, and then he restarted the camera. It was just a test. And when I watched it through the Oculus, I saw it cut. And then I saw, but I knew the environment I was in, and then it cut to a different angle. I'm like, well, I'm not lost. So I said, that should work. And that was that was my whole thesis on if it will work, and it worked fine. So I think that there are cinematic rules in making a movie, and if you're in a location, now you cut from one scene to like you're now a different scene. Yeah, it's a little challenging. And truth be told, you know, there's things, one of the biggest challenges on the cop drama scene in this was the song can't change. You know, we have a song, New Generation, this is the song. It's not like I say, oh, you know what, let's make this part longer in the song. We can't. So I have a very strict template. And I wrote the piece to hit every single beat in the music video, which normally in a regular music video you'd be cutting from every beat, cutting from every angle. So I had to do that same sort of thing with the action playing in a long take. But what happened was I timed everything out pretty well, and then when we got to the concert at the end, you have this part of the song called The Bridge, which is where there's just instrumental, and then you kept back into the song as the first lyric Chris sings, and we cut to him on the concert stage. It's all going to be great. But what happened was I shot so much stuff in the cop drama, and I was really like, and I started adding stuff when we were there. I'm like, yeah, we'll have this thing fall down on a guy. That'll be awesome, you know, whatever. And so when I go to cut it together, I'm like, wow, this is great. You know, I'll just move this cut like 12 seconds into the concert. But now I realize that we're not spending as much time with the band. And truth be told, regardless of the narrative, it is a promotional piece for the band. So you understand who they are as musicians. They're not just guys dancing around in Robin Hood costumes or 70s leisure suits. That they're, you know, this is what they look like. They play music. So the cop drama, I will be the first to admit, is cut very tightly, and it's a little too tight. Honestly, there's a couple scenes.
Yeah,
like,
we must have had like 8 different versions that we looked at before we settled on it. And quite honestly, I think it ends up working. But it was something we spent a great deal of time going back and forth. Yeah.
But when you're watching it, you actually go through. Now, the other thing, the advantage of maybe just making lemonade out of lemons, but you can watch it 3 or 4 times and see 3 or 4 different things.
Yeah.
But it still keeps you in the action.
Let's get one more question, and then I think we'll wrap up. Right here in the front.
Follow up on this question. The question of emotion is very important when it comes to directing, and because we're using those wide lenses, it's very hard. We can't have close-ups. So
Correct.
What are your thoughts on how to convey emotion?
Well, funny enough, in this, when you watch this in the gear, again, it's very misleading to watch this on a screen. But when you watch the headset, there's a point. You know, you see Chris is like this in the shot, and so you can do it. And that was every VR piece I've made. I've tried to do something different, like not purposefully different, but it's like, okay, this worked in, like say the mission. What can I do in Galvanized Souls that I really want to get closer to the actors? So that was really, this video for me was more about trying to get as close to the actors, to get as close of quote-unquote a close-up as you can get. Also, you can't get too close, not because of technical, it's very disconcerting. If you get in really tight, like you're in something like this, framing, it's weird. It's
I think, yeah, part of it is also just familiarity with the hardware that you're working with. You know, having enough opportunity to test and know exactly what you're working with, especially because if you're dealing with something like GoPros where you don't have really a way to monitor that shot, you really need to know what you're dealing with when you're going into it.
One thing, if you guys want to look at Andy Lukowski and BJ Schwartz are sitting here, have Vanishing Point Media, and they did all the behind the scenes for this, and it's online. I don't know the website off the top of my head, but they'll tell you. But there's a great behind the scenes on the video where you see how we shot a lot of stuff, and they did behind the scenes.
You'll see everybody hiding behind boxes.
Yeah, so it's a really great thing. So Vanishing Point, give me the website.
VR.com.
VanishingPointVR.com is a great piece that they put together.
All right, we're being told we got to wrap up, so we'll be around if you have any more questions for us. But thanks for hanging with us and checking out the video.